Welcome, everyone. We'd like to acknowledge the lands upon which we meet today are the traditional territories of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. We acknowledge that Toronto, the Mohawk word meaning the land where trees stand in the water, is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. These lands are now home to many diverse and Indigenous peoples and communities. We are thankful to the people who have since time immemorial cared for Turtle Island, which includes the land we now call Ontario. Acknowledging these traditional Indigenous territories is one way for us to acknowledge the rights and histories of Indigenous peoples. It is also a small way for us to work towards dismantling the continued impacts of colonialism and recognizing the calls for action for truth and reconciliation. We are members who share the dish with one spoon, which teaches us to live on these lands with respect, nonviolence, and sustainability. For those participating virtually in today's meeting, we are encouraging you to reflect upon the history of the lands upon which you are currently located. So please close all running applications to help maintain a stable audio and video connection during our presentation. If your connection freezes, please exit GoToWebinar and then return to the session. The video and slides for this presentation will be posted on CASLPO's website on the International and Non-Accredited Canadian Programs page within a few weeks of this presentation. The agenda will include a 5-minute bio break between before we start the mentorship section of our presentation. You may enter questions in the questions section of GoToWebinar at any time during the presentation. We will answer questions at the end of the section about registration with CASLPO and again after the section about mentorship. We do not, if we do not have time to answer all the questions received prior to or during this presentation, we will answer those questions to the webinar participants following the webinar. We have prepared a few handouts for you, which can be found under the questions section in the menu on the right. So my name is Colleen Myrie, and I am the Director of Registration Services here at CASLPO. Registration Services and Mentorship, sorry. We also have Cassandra.
Hi, my name is Cassandra. I am the Manager of Mentorship with CASLPO, and I also serve as the Audiology Practice Advisor. With us, we also have Sandra.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sandra Corte, and I'm the International Applications Coordinator and one of the Speech Language Pathology Practice Advisors at CASLPO.
We also have some online support and moderators during this presentation who may answer some of your questions directly as the presentation is going on online. So we have Vera Ibarra and Bia Rana. The controls are a little slow, I apologize. There we go. So our presentation outline, we have 4 sections of the presentation. The first being the importance of registration and licensure. The second being the importance of good character. Then we'll talk about becoming a CASLPO registrant. And finally, we'll end with information about mentorship. So we'll start with the importance of registration and licensure. And what is CASLPO? So in Canada, many professions are overseen by regulatory bodies, which are often called colleges. A regulatory college is not an academic institution. Its role is to protect the public by setting standards for professional practice, licensing qualified professionals, and addressing concerns about conduct and competence. The College of Audiologists and Speech-Language Pathologists of Ontario is the regulatory body for audiologists and speech-language pathologists in the province of Ontario. CASLPO is one of many regulatory bodies in Ontario. Other examples include the College of Nurses of Ontario, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, the Law Society of Ontario, which is for lawyers, Professional Engineers Ontario. Each of these regulatory bodies regulates its professions to protect the public. So CASLPO provides many services, the first being registration. So we review new applications, we manage mentorship, and there's also an annual renewal process. We do quality assurance, which includes overseeing the submission of the self-assessment tool, which includes continuous learning activity credits. And we also manage peer assessment, the peer assessment process. There are many forms of communication that we do. There's a published newsletter called The Wave. We manage social media content, provide e-forums, webinars, and public awareness initiatives, and offer professional practice advice for registrants. We also handle the concerns about registrants' conduct and practice by handling inquiries, the reports, complaints, and the discipline process. CASLPO is governed by a board of directors, which is composed of professional registrants, both audiologists and speech-language pathologists, registrants from university programs, community appointees, and public members appointed by the government. The board of directors' role is to serve the public interest by overseeing the regulation of the practice of audiologists and speech-language pathologists in Ontario. So we just want to take a brief moment to outline the differences between the college and a professional association. So as a regulator, we act in the interest of the public by regulating our registrants. A professional association such as SAC or CAA or ASHA or SPA, etc., they act in the interest of the profession. The regulator, the registration process or the licensing process is based on legislated criteria. With a professional association, the members are, the acceptance criteria is based on the association criteria. Licensing or registration is mandatory, while membership with a professional association is voluntary. With a regulator, we're accountable to the public and to government, while the professional association is accountable to their members. We have a full chart of those differences on our website, and I've included a link in this presentation. What is the role of the regulatory body? So we protect the public from harm by ensuring safe and competent practice, by setting minimum requirements for our clinicians. We uphold professional standards by establishing and enforcing clear guidelines for ethical practice and conduct. We maintain quality, the quality of practice and continuing competence by monitoring the quality of professional practice and ensuring registrants remain competent. We also address complaints by investigating public concerns and taking appropriate disciplinary actions when necessary. Without regulations of registration, the public would be vulnerable to unsafe and incompetent healthcare providers. By registering with college, audiologists and speech-language pathologists demonstrate that they have fulfilled a minimum set of qualifications necessary to practice in their fields. To work as an audiologist or speech-language pathologist in Ontario, you must be registered with CASLPO, and you must have a valid CASLPO registration number before you begin to practice. Only registrants of the college have the legal authority to use the restricted titles such as audiologist, speech-language pathologist, speech therapist, any abbreviation of those titles or variations of these titles in Ontario. Registrants also have the legal authority to make representation to the public indicating their qualifications to practice audiology or speech-language pathology in Ontario. So we recommend that before submitting your application, you should review the standard use of a restricted titles document that we have provided as a handout. This document outlines the requirements for using professional titles in Ontario. The use of the restricted titles document explains when and how to use restricted titles in Ontario. This document helps to ensure that you use the restricted titles correctly and follow CASLPO's rules. So we've included some scenarios throughout this presentation. The first one being improper use of the restricted title. So we have Mia, who recently completed her master's degree in speech-language pathology at a university in Australia and submitted her application to CASLPO, but has not yet been issued a license. While waiting for her registration to be processed, Mia is offered a position at a private clinic that serves preschool children with language delays and begins working as support personnel under the supervision of a CASLPO SLP registrant until her license is issued. So Mia assumes that because she has completed her degree and has applied to CASLPO, she can update her LinkedIn and Instagram bios to read pre-registered speech-language pathologist in Toronto working with children ages 2 to 6. Mia also begins using the following signature: Mia C, Masters of Science, SLP, pre-registered speech-language pathologist, with email mia.slp@provider.com. What happens next is that one parent who's one of Mia's clients visits CASLPO's website and cannot find Mia listed on the public register. They contact the college to inquire, and the college sends Mia a cease and desist notice indicating that Mia has engaged in title infringement. So according to the college regulations, Mia can't use the restricted title speech-language pathologist or any variation like pre-registered speech-language pathologist or any abbreviations of the restricted title like SLP. CASLPO takes title infringement very seriously. If the college finds that Mia has been using the protected title without being registered, her application will be sent to the registration committee of the college, who will look at her conduct and decide if she's able to practice in Ontario. So this chart kind of outlines how Mia has used the restricted title and just how she can make small changes in order to avoid making that mistake. So for instance, she can just say that she's a speech-language pathology assistant in Ontario rather than a pre-registered speech-language pathologist. And instead of putting the SLP abbreviation, if she just writes out speech-language pathology as her degree, that's fine. And as well, removing SLP from her email address is important to do. So to avoid possible problems, it's important to follow the rules about using restricted titles. Please be aware that these rules do not prohibit you from indicating your academic credentials in your resume or LinkedIn. It would just be that you're saying you're a doctor of audiology, or you have a degree in speech language pathology or in audiology, rather than using those abbreviations. Key takeaways are that using the restricted title before registration is a serious offense, and engaging in title infringement can affect registration and may delay starting practice. So now we move to the importance of good character. Good character refers to the conduct expected of professionals and supports public trust in the profession. Good character is also defined in CASLPO's registration regulation in Section 3. So Section 3.6 says that the applicant's past and present conduct must afford reasonable grounds for the belief that the applicant does not have a physical or mental condition or disorder that could affect his or her ability to practice the profession in a safe manner, will practice the profession with decency, integrity, and honesty and in accordance with the law, and will display an appropriate professional attitude. So based on the information provided or received during the application process, through self-declarations about past conduct, through social media posts that are available online, your academic history, your employment history, the college may also request additional information such as a criminal background check or an explanation if any concerns arise. Examples of conduct considered are criminal convictions or charges, findings of professional misconduct or incompetence, academic or employment dishonesty, financial or ethical misconduct that raises questions about trustworthiness. So we have another scenario about good conduct and good character. So we have Zola, who applied for a certificate of registration in speech language pathology. After completing her application, she receives an email from CASLPO confirming that she is eligible for an initial certificate of registration pending her completion of the following steps. So completing and signing the registration form with a signed undertaking to take the CETP exam at the next available opportunity, and paying the remaining registration fees. So to complete the registration process for an initial certificate, Zola must have an offer of employment to work as an SLP in Ontario and a mentor. Zola receives an offer of employment and begins working as an SLP in December 9th, 2024, without completing the final steps for registration with CASLPO. On February 1st of 2025, the college receives a call from another SLP who wishes to check if Zola is registered with CASLPO. The college then receives the remaining paperwork from Zola. The college sends Zola a cease and desist notice indicating that Zola has engaged in title infringement. The college then receives a complaint from a parent of a child who is one of Zola's patients, and the parent wishes to file a complaint against Zola's mentor, who is an SLP registered with CASLPO. Zola's application is referred to CASLPO's registration committee for review to determine if Zola's conduct demonstrates a disregard for the law and the principles of decency, integrity, and honesty that members of the profession are expected to uphold. It is always the responsibility of the applicant to ensure that they are following the rules. The registrar is directed as an outcome to this to issue an initial certificate of registration to Zola with the following terms, conditions, and limitations. Zola must complete a professionalism and ethics program within 6 months of the issuance of her initial certificate. And Zola is responsible for paying the costs of the professionalism and ethics program. So it's important to keep in mind that misconduct before registration may trigger an inquiry into an applicant's suitability to practice. Each application would be assessed by the registration committee on a case-by-case basis. The committee will want to know the details of the applicant's conduct before a decision can be made about a registration with the college. So some key takeaways: good character is about trust, ethics, and professionalism. It is an essential part of assessing an applicant's fitness to practice. And the process is designed to be fair, transparent, and focused on public protection. Our next topic is about the Canadian Entry to Practice exams. The Canadian Entry to Practice exam, also known as the CETP exam, it is administered by the Speech, Language, and Audiology Canada, which is a Canadian association. So we wanted to provide you with the distinction between the roles of CASLPO and SAC. So CASLPO sets the professional standards for registration in Ontario, while SAC delivers and manages the CETP exam on behalf of regulators. CASLPO determines which exam is required for entry to practice in Ontario. We have chosen the CETP exam for this purpose, and SAC develops the CETP exam content based on the exam blueprint, which reflects competency standards set by Canadian regulators. CASLPO evaluates the applicant's eligibility to take the CETP exam, and SAC handles the exam logistics and testing accommodations. CASLPO evaluates applicants' final eligibility for registration or licensure, and SAC reports exam results to the regulator. So it's important to know that CASLPO does not administer or deliver the CETP exam, and that SAC does not make registration or licensing decisions. So before you write the CETP exam, you must have submitted your application to CASLPO, and CASLPO must confirm your exam eligibility. For CASLPO to determine your exam eligibility for the next available CETP exam sitting, the college must receive a completed application package with all required supporting documents from you at least 20 weeks before the exam date. Your application package is completed 20 weeks, or sorry, if your application package is completed 20 weeks before the next exam date, but is still under review, you may register for the CETP exam before receiving final confirmation of your eligibility for registration. Once CASLPO assesses your application and confirms your eligibility to take the CETP exam, CASLPO will notify SAC, and if you are already registered for the next exam date, you will be allowed to proceed with the exam. So if you are registered for the CETP exam before being deemed eligible, you will not be permitted to write the exam if you do not submit and complete your application in time for CASLPO to review it for the next exam sitting, or your application has deficiencies. So it's important to note that you should contact SAC if you have questions about exam dates and cost, exam enrollment periods and process, testing accommodations, writing the CETP exam, preparing for the CETP exam, and study resources. We wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about what happens if you fail the CETP exam. So to register with CASLPO, applicants must pass the exam. The applicants are allowed a minimum of 3 attempts to pass the exam. After 3 unsuccessful attempts, exam eligibility is exhausted. However, if exceptional circumstances that impacted your performance, or if you have upgraded your qualifications, you can apply to the registration committee to allow a 4th attempt. If you are an initial registrant who fails the CETP exam during your mentorship period, your initial certificate will expire within 30 business days. During these 30 business days, you must inform your employer and your mentor and discharge or transfer your patients. Once the certificate expires, you must stop practicing and cannot resume until you've passed the CETP exam. If an applicant fails the CETP exam before becoming an initial registrant, they cannot register as an initial registrant or a general registrant until they have passed the exam. So some key takeaways is that CASLPO requires the CETP exam for registration. SAC delivers the CETP exam on behalf of Canadian regulators that require it. For applicants applying for registration in Ontario, CASLPO determines who is eligible to take the CETP exam. SAC reports exam results, but does not make registration decisions. If you wish to write the CETP exam on a specific sitting date, submitting a complete application to CASLPO on time is essential. So I will hand over the presentation to Sandra.
Thanks, Colleen. So now I'm going to give you some information about the application process. So with your application, you're applying to CASLPO for 2 reasons. One is to determine your eligibility for CASLPO registration, and also to determine your eligibility to enroll in the CETP exam. So when you apply, listed on this slide are the requirements. So there's you need to have a professional master's degree in audiology or speech language pathology. And if you've attended a program in the US for audiology, and AUD would also apply here. Fulfillment of your academic requirements, including coursework and clinical practicum content and hours. Good character, which we've already discussed. Language proficiency, if that's relevant. Your eligibility to work in Canada, and your currency for general license. So just a note about work experience. So this is looked at after your eligibility for registration has been confirmed. Work experience is used to determine if you're eligible for a general license or general registration. And you need to demonstrate that you meet the currency requirements for a general license. So currency is the completion of a minimum of 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech language pathology in the 3 years prior to submitting your application. So next we're going to look at where to start. So after you've completed a professional master's degree or an degree in audiology or speech language pathology, you must complete our online application, which you can access through our website, and submit the required documents, as well as submitting an application fee of $150. So in terms of accessing the application, So this is a screenshot from our website, and you'll see that you'll click on applicants at the top, and then you look for international and non-accredited Canadian programs. You'll click on that. And you will see that there will be information about getting started. And I would strongly recommend that you review all the documentation under here before you start the application process, because it will give you a lot of very valuable information. So below the getting started section, there will be a spot for you to click on, and that's how you access the online application. Under resources, there are two documents, our application guide and also the online portal user guide. And I will say that our application guide is 45 pages in length, and it's quite lengthy, but again, I would recommend that you review this document in detail before starting the application. I guess the other thing I'll just mention about the online user guide, you probably will want to have that open while you're going through and filling out the application, because it will also be very useful to you. So this here is a screenshot from that you'll see on the online portal user guide. And I will just say that when you go into the online portal where the application is located, it will look slightly different than this, but all the information will be the same. So this section includes your date of birth, your first, middle, and last names should be the same. Whatever you enter here should be the same that is shown on your proof of eligibility to work in Canada document that you'll be submitting to CASLPO. And you'll enter this information and select the profession that's applicable to you, and then please use an email address that you check often and have access to and will continue to have access to. And then you'll go down to the bottom and you will click on US International Graduate, and that will bring you in, open up the rest of the application. So if you have any questions related to using the online portal, as I mentioned, there's the guide, but also please contact international_grad@caslpo.com. Okay, what documents are required? So there is a section on our website entitled Documents to Submit to the College for Your Application. So you want to take a look at that. And these are the documents that need to be submitted. So a syllabus for each course submitted, you'll upload these into the portal. Copies are okay. Evidence of eligibility to work in Canada. So you can submit this with your application or later, but it is required before you can become registered. The following documents need to be originals. So the official university transcripts for all relevant degrees and also courses. So if you took a one-off course somewhere, let's say you needed a prerequisite to get into your master's program, and you are going to use that course submitted in your course, in the coursework requirements section of the application, we would need a transcript for that course from that institution. We'll also need an academic credential assessment for each degree that was obtained outside of Canada, a signed summary of your clinical practicum experience through your program. So there's a form for that, a signed verification of registration form from other jurisdictions if applicable. And I will just say that we require a verification of registration form from all jurisdictions. So if you're currently registered in a jurisdiction, we'll need one from that jurisdiction, but also if you in the past and no longer are an active registrant with a jurisdiction, will also need a verification of registration form from that jurisdiction. And a language proficiency test, if applicable, is also required. Okay, so a little bit more about each of these requirements. So in terms of your syllabi, we need this documentation on our files to confirm that each applicant has fulfilled all the hours and content requirements. And we ask that you provide a syllabus for each course that you include in the coursework section of the application. In terms of evidence of eligibility to work in Canada, as I mentioned, this can be submitted at the time you apply or prior to becoming registered, but we do require it. And the documentation would be a Canadian citizenship or a permanent resident status document or a Canadian employment authorization document. Official transcripts, as I mentioned, are required from your graduate and undergraduate programs and universities at which you took courses relevant to the requirements. And CASLPO requires an official transcript to be sent to us directly from the university, and it can be password protected. Official e-transcripts are also accepted. So we require an academic credential assessment report, an original document for each degree obtained outside of Canada. And the agencies from which we can accept these reports are World Education Services, International Qualifications Assessment Services, or the University of Toronto Comparative Education Service. And also, please note that if you are going to use WES, then you don't need to request that transcripts be sent from the university, sent to CASLPO from the university, because WES will take care of that. But if you are going to use either of the other two services, you will need to request transcripts from your university be sent to us. The summary of clinical practicum hours form needs to be completed by, or signed, I should say, and verified by your program director or a designate of your audiology or speech language pathology program. Photocopies are not acceptable, and if it's a paper version, they must contain the original signature, and we do accept electronic copies if they come directly from the program director or the designate's work email address. And the other thing I will just mention here is that if you are wanting to submit a clinical practicum form for a bachelor's degree that you completed in audiology or speech language pathology and a master's degree, then you need to submit 2 separate clinical practicum hours forms. Verification registration form, again, this is if it's applicable, and as I mentioned, it has to be, we need them from each jurisdiction where you are currently licensed or were previously licensed. Okay, in terms of evidence of English or French proficiency, if applicable, if your language of instruction of your professional master's degree was not English or French, then you must submit a result from one of these following tests. And there's more information on the website about these requirements. In your submission, the following documents must be originals sent from the originating institution. So university transcripts, as I mentioned, unless you're using WES for your academic credentialing assessment, an academic credential assessment, your clinical practicum hours form, and a language proficiency test if required. Other documents can be sent electronically in PDF format, or you can mail them to us. I just want to mention a little bit about the translation of documents. So all documents and letters not written in English or French must be accompanied by an official translation from one of these 5 agencies. Now we'll talk a little bit about the actual coursework requirements section of the application. So you must provide information about the relevant courses you completed in the following areas. So there's 4 coursework areas and a total of 5 sections, with the 5th section being content areas. So I'll speak a little bit more about this now. So the first coursework requirements section is basic knowledge specific to the profession. And a minimum of 135 hours is required here. And for both SLP and audiology, at least one course in the area of anatomical, physiological, and neurological basis of speech, language, and functioning. And if you're in speech language pathology, at least 2 courses in the fundamental information pertaining to the use of speech and language processes. And if you're in audiology, at least 2 courses pertaining to the physical basis and perceptual process of hearing. The next section pertains to basic knowledge related to other professions and disciplines. And in this section, a minimum of 180 coursework hours are required. And for both professions, at least one course in psychological and social aspects of human development is required. At least 2 courses in basic principles and methods involved in conducting research in human behavior, and at least 1 course in professional practices and issues, administrative organization of SLP audiology services. And I forgot to mention that these coursework requirements, we do have a handout for you, so you don't need to worry about taking notes. And also, as you can see on this slide, there's also examples of course names that would potentially fit into each of these categories. You also need to include a minimum of 45 hours of coursework in the minor professional area. So that would mean that if you're in speech language pathology, you need to have coursework in the area of audiology. And if you're an audiology applicant, you need to demonstrate coursework in speech language pathology. You also obviously need to demonstrate coursework, list coursework in the coursework requirements section in the major professional area, and we require a minimum of 405 hours. Now, in terms of the content areas, this information is taken from the major area, and for speech language pathology, you need to demonstrate coursework in the development of competencies in each of these areas that are listed here. And for audiology, you need to demonstrate that you have competencies in each of the following areas. And I will just note that we require evidence for the selection, fitting, verification, and validation of hearing aids. Okay, you will be asked to provide the following information for each relevant course, and usually this information is found on the syllabi. So the course number, the course name, the total instructional hours, including lecture or tutorial, and I should say tutorial hours, which are counted at 100%, and laboratory or problem-based learning hours, which are counted at 30%. When you are filling out the coursework requirements section, please be aware that you can only use a given coursework hour can be counted only once. So, you know, if there's a course that fits into the major professional area, then you can't put it somewhere else in the coursework requirements section. Courses can be included from your master's and your bachelor's degrees in the coursework requirements section, but please note that it's expected that the majority of hours are in the major area. So the way hours are determined, the number of hours per week by the number of weeks in a semester. So if a course is 3 hours per week and it's 15 weeks, then you're looking at it's 45 hours would be the total. And you would count the hours indicated across the weeks in the syllabus if the schedule is irregular. So there's information in the application guide about how to calculate the hours. And again, this information should be contained in the syllabus and or the transcript that you provide to CASLPO. If the information isn't there, then you can provide this information in a different way, and probably the easiest would be a letter from a professor who taught the course, just indicating all that information that we require and the total number of hours. So we require the syllabi to confirm the content areas that you covered in your coursework, to confirm the number of hours that you completed in a given course, and to determine which section of our coursework form a course's content fits into. If the syllabus doesn't contain the information you require, then you will need to provide additional information, and CASLPO staff will reach out when reviewing your application to request that information. So what can you do if the syllabus doesn't contain the information that we require? So still submit that syllabus with your application. And as I mentioned, you can request a letter from the professor for clarification, give us the required information, which is listed on slide 83. But I also want to just share that if you do not have the syllabus from the course that you took, please do not provide us with a current year syllabus, because that won't provide the information about the content that was covered when you took the course. Content can change, and we really do require information from the course when you took it. So do the best you can with gathering this information. I know that sometimes people don't always keep their syllabi, but if you don't have the appropriate documentation, we'll work with you to obtain this missing information. I'll leave it at that for that. Okay, so we're going to just go back and talk a little bit here about what's on the website. So there's some other important resources that you can take a look at. So again, when you get to this page, you'll want to scroll down. And we already talked about the online portal user guide and the application guide, but under resources is where you'll also find the clinical practicum hours form for audiology and speech language pathology applicants. There's also the verification of registration form, which you will give to your program director. You'll also find information about the most recent webinar, so the slides and the webinar recording. So this information from today's webinar will be posted in the next few weeks. The other thing is there's also some frequently asked questions that you can review that deal with a lot of topics like the CETP exam, mentorship, registration, the application process. So there's a wealth of information there for you to take a look at. Now, this is a question, obviously a very important question. How long does the process take? Okay, so this is just a graphic that outlines the steps, and I'm going to go into a little bit more detail over the next few slides, but I just want to say that these timelines, they are approximate and dependent on individual circumstances, they may vary. So the intake procedure. So you'll receive automatic email updates after submitting your application, and each day that you upload an additional document. And once you've completed the application process and you've paid the application fee, it will take up to 15 days for CASLPO staff to determine if your application is complete or if additional documentation is required. Once we've received all your documents, you'll receive a ready for review email from the portal, and this will let you know that your application is in the queue to be reviewed. In terms of the review procedure, as it may take up to 13 to 15 weeks to complete from the date that you receive your ready for review email. And the complete application is reviewed by college staff to determine if all requirements have been met. If you're eligible, then you may register for CASLPO and you may enroll in the CETP exam with SAC. If there are deficiencies, one or more deficiencies in your application, so it could be in terms of missing coursework, it could be missing courses, or it could be missing hours, clinical practicum hours in the area of good character, then your application will undergo further review by CASLPO's registration committee. The committee meets quarterly, so your application time will increase by 3 to 6 months. So once your application goes to the registration committee, the panel may conclude that there are no deficiencies and that they will direct the registrar to issue a certificate to the applicant, a certificate of registration. There are deficiencies, so they will direct the registrar to issue a certificate of registration if the applicant successfully completes additional training or examination as specified by the panel. There are other concerns, so the panel would direct the registrar to impose specified terms, conditions, and limitations on a certificate of registration of the applicant, or registration must be denied, so they would direct the registrar to refuse to issue a certificate of registration. I can say that denying registration is very rare, and but it will happen if you do not have a professional master's degree and choose to proceed with the application review process. So we at CASLPO, we are always trying to process applications as quickly as possible, but we must review them in the order each application is received in its completed form. And this is as per the Office of the Fairness Commissioner of Ontario. So we do request that you resist the urge to call the college to check the status of your application, as it slows down our processing significantly. And also, please be aware that we cannot change the order of applications or fast track your application, no matter what the circumstances are. There's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. In terms of contact with the college, for confidentiality reasons, we cannot speak to anyone other than the applicant about their application without the applicant's permission. So, you know, we can't talk to a parent or a spouse or an employer unless we have an applicant's written permission. It's been our experience that misunderstood or distorted information by a third party could lead to delays or even errors in your application. So just finally, I want to just say, please plan ahead, apply as soon or as early as you possibly can, and please speak with potential employers about the application timeline and the registration process timeline. The application timeline, you can access it here through this slide, but also it is found on our website. And we do very much recommend that you do not set a date to start employment until you have been told by CASLPO that you are eligible for registration. because at that point, then it's a finite amount of time. It's about probably about 3 weeks if you respond to the email and send back all the information for registration quickly. It takes about that amount of time to become registered. But again, all that information is on the application timeline. And finally, I just want to say again that it's not possible for us to fast track any applications, as I said, no matter what the situation entails that you're facing. Okay, I'm going to pass over the presentation now to Colleen, and she's going to speak to you about the registration processes.
Let me see if I can advance these slides again. There we go. All right. So as you complete the application process, the next step is to become registered. So we have 4 categories of registration. We have the initial certificate, in which when you become an initial registrant, you must complete the process under mentorship. And so you have to be mentored for at least 6 months as part of that process. If you have a general certificate, that's a fully registered independent practitioner of the college. If you have an academic certificate, you are you have an appointment to teach at a post-secondary institution in either audiology or speech-language pathology. And your practice is limited to that academic appointment. And also we have a non-practicing certificate. So you can maintain your registration with the college if you are taking a leave or a break from practicing in Ontario, and they're without having to resign your certificate and then reapplying, which is a very onerous process. So you can maintain your registration as a non-practicing registrant if you wish to take a break from practice. So usually for most applicants, will become registered as either an initial registrant or a general registrant. So we're just going to talk about the differences between the two. So a general registrant has met the academic requirements for registration and has provided at least 750 hours of patient care or related work in the previous 3 years before submitting an application to the college. And they have also passed the CETP exam. An initial registrant is somebody who has met the academic requirements, but may not have provided 750 hours of patient care related work in the last 3 years, or could be a new graduate. And also they have not yet attempted the CETP exam. So as I mentioned, becoming an initial registrant means that you must complete CASLPO's mentorship program. So when you're thinking about the timing of the registration and exam, if you are applying for a general license, you must successfully complete the CETP exam prior to your registration. However, if you are applying for an initial certificate, you have 2 options. You can either complete the CETP exam prior to registration once you've been considered eligible, or you can begin practicing as an initial registrant and complete the CETP exam during the 6-month term of your initial certificate. However, please note that if you fail the CETP exam during the term of your initial certificate will expire, and you must pass the CETP exam before reapplying for registration with a college. So as you're going through the registration process, I'm just going to point out the differences between the two certificates. So with an initial certificate, you have to have an offer of employment and you have to line up an eligible mentor. A general certificate, you don't need to have an offer of employment or a mentor to complete the process. For an initial certificate, you're completing the registration form, which you must submit at least 2 weeks ahead of your employment start date. It's the same for the general certificate as well, that timeline. However, with the initial certificate, you have to also name your mentor and provide their registration number. That information, the registration number of your mentor, can be found on CASLPO's public register. You must also, as an initial, when you're applying for initial certificate, you have to provide us with your status with respect to the CETP exam. So you can indicate whether or not you're awaiting enrollment, whether you've already enrolled for the next CETP sitting, or if you have written the CETP exam. With the general certificate, you must confirm that you have passed the CETP exam. With the initial certificate, in addition to providing us with your status, you have to sign an undertaking, which is an agreement with the college that you will take the CETP exam during your 6-month term of your initial certificate, and that you will take the next available CETP exam during that time, and you'll stop practicing within 30 business days if you fail the exam. With a general certificate, this undertaking isn't required. The initial certificate, also, if you have failed the CETP exam before becoming registered, you will not be issued an initial certificate until you have passed the exam. So it's important for a person who's applying for a general certificate to also note that a general certificate will not be issued to them until after they have passed the exam. For an initial certificate, you're required to indicate your employment start date, similarly with the general certificate. However, with the initial certificate, we would like you to note that you should not submit your registration form earlier than 3 weeks before your anticipated employment start date. And the reason for this is that the timeline helps to ensure that you meet your mentor within the required 30-day period following the issuance of your certificate. If you submit the form too early, it may lead to a misalignment of the mentorship timeline and could cause unnecessary delays in the process. So just keep that in mind as you are submitting your registration form. The initial registrant is not required to provide a verification of employment form. However, the person that's applying for a general certificate, we want to know your employment history. We want a declaration of your practice recency, which kind of speaks about the requirement for 750 hours within the last 3 years. And we also would like you to submit a verification of employment form. This form is completed by your most recent employer or a colleague verifying that you have provided at least 750 hours of patient care or related work within the last 3 years. Sandra mentioned this earlier. During the process, you could have provided your verification of your eligibility to work in Canada document. However, if you have not done that earlier in the process, before you become registered is when you have to submit that document. We also require that both the initial and the general registrant provide employment information. If you're getting an initial certificate, you need to also provide the HR contact information, the name and email address for each of the locations where you're going to be practicing. For a general certificate, because it's not necessary to have an offer of employment, you may not be employed when you're wishing to complete your registration. So if you're not employed, you must designate an address and a telephone number as your practice location information for the public register. Most registrants that are unemployed might use their home address and telephone number for that reason. If you do not wish to, you can use a PO box address for that reason. Once you have employment, we require you to update that your employment information in your portal account within 30 days of finding employment. We also require that you have professional liability insurance coverage. So we have linked to our bylaw regarding professional liability insurance in this presentation, but you're required to have the information of the carrier name, the policy number, policy certificate number, and the expiry date of the policy. And the coverage amount has to be a minimum of $2 million per claim. So that requirement is for both initial and general registrants. And you're required to pay 2 fees to complete your registration, one being the registration fee, which is $50, and the second being a prorated annual fee. The prorated annual fee is the annual fee that is prorated by quarter of the registration year, and our registration year runs from October 1st to September 30th. So the fee chart is available on our website, where you'll find the prorated amount that's due that coincides with when you wish to start practicing in Ontario. Once we have received all the required documents, it may take up to 2 weeks to issue a certificate of registration. Completing your registration, it will be issued within 2 weeks of our receipt of your registration form. If you submit an incomplete registration form or any information is in error, this may delay your registration. When your registration is complete, you will receive your CASLPO number, and you will be visible on CASLPO's public register immediately. So we've highlighted where it says find a registered professional. So if you click on there and you enter your name or your registration number, you will be listed there. So that is information that you should give to your employer if they want to verify your registration status. All right, so now that you are a CASLPO registrant and you have a CASLPO number, you can use the title and begin working as an audiologist or speech language pathologist in Ontario. So it's important, there are some important reminders for all CASLPO registrants. We have a registration renewal process. So all CASLPO registrants are responsible for keeping their certificate of registration up to date, and all certificates expire on September 30th each year. So all registrants must renew their certificate on or before October 1st every year, and that includes newly registered initial registrants or general registrants. If you just became registered in September, you still have to log into our system and renew for the coming year, which begins on October 1st. So some important takeaways. So regarding registration and licensure, registration ensures that only qualified professionals can practice. So don't start practicing before you're issued a CASLPO registration number. Good character is foundational to registration and helps to ensure that professionals act in the best interest of the public. The CETP exam you must apply to CASLPO and be approved as eligible for registration before you take the CETP exam. So it's recommended that you apply at least 20 weeks before the next available registration exam. Also, we encourage you to read the application guide. When you, of course, you start the application process online through the registrant portal. We acknowledge receipt of an application within 15 days of submitting application, and you'll receive an email confirming its receipt and listing any missing documents. And the college will review your application only after all required documents have been received and the application is complete. So if you have any questions following this presentation, you can always reach us at international_grad@caslpo.com or also at registration@caslpo.com. So we are ready to take any questions. Bia, do we have any questions?
Yes, absolutely. And the first one is actually for you. Somebody's asking if they're registered and working under a professional body outside of Ontario and their LinkedIn profile reflects this while their CASLPO application is being reviewed, would this be considered an inappropriate use of restricted titles?
So no, I think oftentimes what we see is somebody is listed on LinkedIn as with the professional title, but they are indicating that they're actually in Ontario. So it's often context, and it's more obvious than somebody who, if somebody is in another province and it's clear that they're registered with another regulatory body, and that's in their LinkedIn profile, that's fine. It's somebody who is actually living in Ontario and might be working, and they are using that information while in Ontario.
Got it. Thank you so much, Colleen. The next question that we have is for Sandra. It's from somebody who is asking whether their clinical hour requirements, so the 350, can these hours be paid? For example, audiology hours that were received when they were working as a CDA, or if they had these audiology hours done as a volunteer outside of their master's program.
The short answer is no. The clinical practicum hours must be completed as part of a professional master's degree. And if somebody is short, let's say hours in the minor clinical area, minor professional area, then there is a process that you would need to go through. So I would recommend that after you've applied to us and you've received the ready for review email from us, reach out to me and we can talk about what the requirements are that you would have to meet in order to complete those hours. I can also tell you that hours through a CDA program or a college program are not applicable to the clinical practicum hours component.
Okay, thank you so much, Sandra. I have another one for you. This one asks, what factors should I look for to ensure that the International Professional Master's Program I chose or am choosing will allow me to practice in Ontario following graduation?
Yes, we often get this question. So you need your professional, the professional master's degree that you complete has to be recognized in Canada as a master's degree. So it has to be as a professional master's degree. So it needs a research component, coursework, and clinical practicum components. So you want to find a master's program that's the equivalent to a Canadian master's program. So generally, the master's program would include about 24 months of study and include a clinical practicum. So you want to look for that. So if there are some one-year master's programs out there, that wouldn't be equivalent to a Canadian program. And you also want to carefully review our practicum, clinical practicum and coursework requirements that you can find in the application guide. And you want to compare it to the program that you're looking at. If the program doesn't have coursework in the minor area, then you may want to look at taking a course, an online course somewhere. And also look at your undergraduate courses because you want to see if those courses meet any of our coursework requirements.
I would add that we do have on our website something called the Academic Equivalency Framework. And so in that tab, we have two charts, one for audiology and one for speech language pathology. And that also outlines all the coursework and practicum requirements. So that's, other than the guide, that would be another place to look.
Amazing. Okay, Colleen, since we had you speaking, I'll ask you one more that I think is for you. This person is asking whether they can apply for liability insurance while their application is still in the review process.
Well, applying for liability insurance, it's probably a really quick thing to obtain. So it's not something that you probably need to get that early in the process. But if you're able to get it earlier, that's great. The only thing about liability insurance, usually if you're a new graduate or someone, they will require you to provide proof of registration before they actually issue the certificate. So it becomes a little bit of a circular process. So if you get your certificate of registration, you have to provide, get your policy number and certificate from the insurance company and then give it to us. And then as soon as we've issued your registration, you have to give that number back to the insurance provider. So it's a bit of a circular process, but people manage to obtain that information and get it to us and then flip it back to their insurance provider quite easily.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Colleen. Sandra, I have one for you. You folks can let me know how we're doing on time. Do we have time for a couple of more questions?
Probably one more, and then we'll give a break to people and go start the mentorship.
Sounds good. So Sandra will get our last question for right now, which says, can I combine clinical practicum hours for my undergraduate and my master's together?
Yes, if your bachelor's degree was a clinical degree in speech language pathology or audiology, you can submit those hours along with the graduate hours. We do see that sometimes, that individuals need the hours from both. But again, you need to use 2 separate clinical practicum hours forms need to be completed, one for the bachelor's degree and one for the master's degree.
Sounds great. Thank you, Sandra.
All right, thank you, Bia. I think so. We'll give people 5 minutes for a bio break, and we'll be back to start the presentation with the mentorship portion. Okay, and of course, we'll try and answer more questions at the end.
Hopefully everybody's had a sufficient amount of time for a break. We're going to start discussing the mentorship program that you would become a part of as an initial practice registrant of the college. This section of the presentation will highlight the purpose of the program, and we will talk about some tips and tricks that are important for you to know as you enter into the mentorship program or as you are seeking mentorship. So CASLPO's mentorship program has been in place since 1994, and it serves an important purpose related to the college's role and mandate. First, mentorship is a condition of an initial certificate of registration. Initial registrants must successfully complete mentorship before they can become general registrants of the college. To protect the public, the college develops minimum practice standards that audiologists and speech-language pathologists in Ontario must meet. During mentorship, the mentor assesses the mentee's compliance with these minimum standards and ultimately decides whether to recommend mentees for a general certificate of registration based on understanding of and compliance with the college's standards. The mentorship period serves as an introduction to the requirements of the quality assurance program, which all general registrants must meet and complete annually. Mentorship provides initial registrants with the support of an experienced colleague to ensure that they have the knowledge, skill, and judgment to practice safely as regulated healthcare professionals. Mentees accept responsibility for their role in maintaining the public's confidence in the profession's ability to provide safe, quality, and ethical care by engaging in the long-term process of independent learning, self-reflection, and evaluation of their own competence. For anyone joining from the United States, CASLPO's mentorship program is not the same as the clinical fellowship year required for ASHA certification. After initial registrants have been issued their CASLPO registration number, they will receive the mentorship program guidelines via email. Mentees should discuss the guidelines and the details of the mentorship contract with their mentor. It is a requirement that the initial practice registrant submits their mentorship contract within 30 days of the start of their employment. Important points that you should note in discussing with your mentor prior to submission of your mentorship contract are, firstly, your start date. It must be on or after the date of initial registration. You also need to discuss the process and requirements for mentoring. Specifically, you should be reviewing the standards and how you will achieve your patient care hours and mentored guidance hours. You should identify where, how frequently, and when you will meet with your mentor. And you should identify methods of evaluation and feedback. This could come in either written, verbal format. It could be done in person via video conferencing, directly in the MSAT tool, and where and when these interactions are going to occur should be identified. Lastly, you need to identify a third party who can serve as support for conflict resolution. There are 3 important deadlines in mentorship that mentees are responsible for meeting. You must submit your signed mentorship contract within 30 days of receiving your CASLPO registration number. The mentorship period doesn't start until CASLPO receives the contract. That's what allows the mentee and mentor to access the MSAT. In instances where mentees have neglected to submit a contract, any time spent in mentorship and patient care or mentored guidance hours that were obtained during that time are not verifiable, and therefore they will not be counted towards the mentorship period. Once mentees gain access to the MSAT through the submission of their mentorship contract, they will be able to view the due dates for the midterm and final evaluations. Midterm evaluations are due 30 days after the midway, which occurs at 3 months. In mentorship, the final evaluation is actually due following the end of the mentorship period. There's a 30-day grace period during which the final mentorship report can be submitted. And that 30-day grace period is there to allow mentees and mentors to fulfill the requirements of the evaluation. Remember that as a regulated health professional, completing your mentorship and demonstrating that you meet the standards of the profession is your responsibility. As a general registrant, there will be important deadlines that occur annually, and these incur late fees and revocation of your license if they're missed. During mentorship, the mentee must complete a minimum 6-month period of mentored practice. During that minimum 6-month period, they must provide at least 500 hours of patient care, receive at least 48 hours of guidance from their mentor, and complete both the midterm and final evaluations in the mentorship self-assessment tool. What does it mean to be accountable for your practice? It means that you are a professional who is expected and required to explain your actions and decisions. Professionalism is an attitude or a personal philosophy demonstrated by a desire to always improve and learn, knowing and understanding your scope of practice and the limitations of your knowledge, leading when you're able, doing your best, maintaining professional boundaries, and always putting your patients first. Professionalism is also a set of behaviors that might include things like responsibility, reliability, being courteous to others, showing respectfulness to others, and being accountable for your actions. Regulated health professionals are expected to engage in self-reflection and evaluation of their own practice. Principles of adult learning teach us that we are not always accurate or objective in evaluating ourselves, and that self-assessment is enhanced and more accurate with external input. This is the premise for the peer assessment program under quality assurance and for the mentorship program. Mentors fulfill the important role of providing objective input on how mentees are meeting minimum standards of practice. A mentor's role is to provide guidance and support to help mentees reflect on their practice and apply standards, to improve mentees' competence commensurate with their career stage, to apply principles of sound clinical reasoning, to observe and discuss mentees' practice and how they are integrating standards for the profession, to provide mentees with general guidance on practice issues, and to submit reports on the mentee's progress to the college. Mentors can have a great deal of influence on a mentee at this stage of their career. Mentorship is critical in assisting new audiologists and speech-language pathologists to form positive habits early in their practice. CASLPO relies on mentors to fulfill this important role to support our mandate of protecting the public, but it also benefits the professions, the employer, the interdisciplinary teams, and other professionals that they might be working with. You will gain access to the MSAT when your mentorship contract has been approved by the college. Both you and your mentor have different but similar reporting requirements in the MSAT. You will use the MSAT to complete a self-evaluation of your practice, to communicate with your mentor, to complete self-ratings for minimum practice standards and indicators, to develop learning goals and complete associated learning activities, to complete the midterm evaluation, and lastly, to complete the final evaluation. Let's focus our attention now on some tips for ensuring a positive and beneficial mentorship experience. The college works with approximately 220 to 230 initial practice registrants annually, meaning that at any given point in the time of the year, we may have up to 230 individuals working through their mentorship period. The vast majority of these individuals do very well with mentorship because we have very committed professions. Some of the suggestions that I will highlight are described such that it can help you to determine certain elements of a job that might be beneficial to your development during the job search process. There are also things that you need to think about as you begin your mentorship period. First, before you accept a job offer, take time to learn about the workplace or the organization where you're seeking employment. Clarifying this information is important so that you have a better idea of what to expect. Ask your prospective employers what a typical workday looks like, whether there are experienced audiologists or speech-language pathologists on the team, what supports might be available for new employees to the organization, and whether other professionals on the team have provided mentorship before. For example, if you're considering working at a private practice, it may be helpful to ask how consistent your caseload will be. This will help you determine whether you will be able to get enough patient care hours and whether your mentor will be physically located at the same site as you. Your first job experience can have an important impact on the development of your career. You want to be in an environment where there is professionalism. Professionalism should be demonstrated by your colleagues and peers, and you should feel confident that there are appropriate practices being used in the workplace. The college regulates audiologists and speech-language pathologists. It does not have the authority to regulate employers or facilities where the professions work. Because of this, it's very important for you to research the organization that you're hoping to work in and to speak with professionals working there to ensure that this environment is very reputable. We would encourage you to use the link on this slide to access the public register. This can allow you to search for audiologists and speech-language pathologists who are working in Ontario. These individuals would be listed on the public register, and it would include details of their registration with the college, including if there are any areas of concern related to their practice. Consider also whether you will be an independent contractor or an employee of the organization. You can negotiate or seek professional advice on contracts or verbal agreements before you sign an employment contract. Be aware that you may have access to legal consultation services free of charge through your professional liability insurance plan. And this may be supportive in vetting an employment contract before signing it. You need to ensure that you can meet standards of practice and your professional obligations. During mentorship, you will be learning the standards, reflecting on how you meet them, and discussing this with your mentor. This will happen in tandem with learning how to perform the expectations of your position. It is important to understand the process expected in your workplace for obtaining and documenting consent. It's also important that this process or processes align with legislative and regulatory requirements in Ontario. If applicable, make sure you understand the billing practices of the employer and that they adhere to the college's standards. Confirm that your information is only used for billing when you or someone you have supervised has provided the services, and that the billing system allows for an itemized invoice. Review the college's documents on record keeping and ensure that you understand the practices of the employing organization, including how clinical and financial records are stored and secured, and the procedures for release of information. Clarify whether you will be responsible for supervising support personnel and that you understand your professional obligations by reviewing CASLPO's documents on supervision of support personnel highlighted on this slide. Make sure that the billing system allows for the name and job title of the support personnel on invoices. Ask the employer about their infection control practices and ensure that you meet the standards for infection and prevention control. Be aware of the many resources available to you that might support your practices. Resources might include resources available on CASLPO's website or resources available on the Professional Association website. It might include others that you're working with, perhaps your mentor or your colleagues. And lastly, it might include a review of the evidence in the literature. Please also be aware that the college has practice advisors available that can help registrants meet their professional obligations. You can contact practice advisors by email or phone to discuss your inquiries regarding professional obligations. Finally, be clear and honest about the support you will need to practice to the best of your ability. Difficulties happen when expectations are unclear. Indicate if you need further training and/or support in a particular area, and seek clarification if you're uncertain about anything. Remember that completing your mentorship and demonstrating that you meet the standards of the profession is your responsibility. Make the most of your mentorship by seeking peer support from your mentor and other colleagues, and approach your work with professionalism. CASLPO has many resources to support you in being successful in the mentorship program. We encourage you to explore them on our website. I'd like to briefly review what happens once you have successfully completed your mentorship period. A general certificate of registration with CASLPO will be issued to you when you have successfully completed your mentorship, passed the CETP exam, and, if applicable, fulfilled any outstanding orders issued by the registration committee. To maintain your general CASLPO registration, you must provide a minimum of 750 hours of patient care or related work in audiology or speech-language pathology during every 3-year period, beginning on the day that you were issued your general certificate. You will also need to meet the requirements of the Quality Assurance Program, which are similar to mentorship. Again, if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to mentorship@caslpo.com, and please review the mentorship resources available on our website. I'm happy to answer any questions that might be available in the chat. Bia Rivera, if you could assist.
Absolutely. So we have a couple for you. The first one reads, while under mentorship, can I work as a care coordinator at a home care agency? The title would be care coordinator, not SLP.
As long as you're not providing clinical judgment or clinical services to patients in that environment as an audiologist or an SLP, you wouldn't need to be under mentored guidance. My understanding of that type of role is that it is more administrative in nature and that you would not be delivering direct care. So as long as that's the case, you shouldn't need to be in mentorship. However, if there are situations where you're being asked to deliver clinical care or provide clinical judgment and use your knowledge and expertise and training specific to the delivery of services, that would not be appropriate without being licensed as an initial practice registrant with a mentor in place.
Thanks so much, Cassandra. There's another one for you that asks, can my mentorship be completed after I have completed 500 hours, even if that is before 6 months?
Is it possible to have whoever asked that question reframe it? I'm not sure that I'm clear on the request.
If you're the person who sent in that question, could you clarify using the questions tab? Thank you so much.
I think it's probably if you've completed the minimum requirement of 500 hours of patient care hours, can you say that you've completed your mentorship? before the 6 months has gone by. And you cannot, I guess that's the question. The mentorship must be at least 6 months in length. That's actually in the legislation is the minimum term of mentorship. Most people do more than 500 hours of patient care during their mentorship. The 500 hours is just a minimum requirement. It's not, it doesn't signal that you're done mentorship.
Okay, wonderful. We'll move on to one for Sandra that is asking if, as an applicant, folks can skip the nearest upcoming CETP exam date for the one that is following it.
So if I understand the question, this is if somebody is registered. So if you're an initial registrant, when you become an initial registrant, you sign an undertaking to indicate that you are going to take the next available CETP sitting. And that will depend on the date when you've registered, because if the enrollment date has already passed, then you would have to wait till the next enrollment date to become registered. I don't know, Colleen, if you wanted to add anything to that response.
Sure. So if you become registered while the enrollment window is open, you must register for the exam that's coming up. So, you know, if the window's open and you're an initial registrant, you must register for that sitting and take it when it comes. If you become an initial registrant and that enrollment period has ended when your certificate is issued, then, as Sandra mentioned, you wait for the next enrollment period to open up before you, and then you enroll for that exam, which would be coming up at a future date.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much. We have another one for Sandra. There's an applicant who is asking whether there's any guidance on how to complete the clinical practicum hours form, and if not, whether that's going to be released by CASLPO.
I guess I would want to know what they mean by how to fill it out. You would be looking at what clinical practicum hours you completed during your degree, and then you need to apply those numbers to the assessment and the treatment sections, and then under children and adults. You would make those totals. There's also a section to include the speech language pathology hours, so your minor clinical practicum hours. Under the simulated practice section, it doesn't specifically indicate whether it's assessment or treatment or children or adults, but you could certainly add that underneath whatever hour amount you included in that section. So for example, if you did under basic audiometric measurements under assessment adults, you could put that, include that underneath the numbers amount, like that it was adults and it was assessment. And a maximum of 50 hours is allowed for simulated hours in the major area. And you could also potentially have done some simulated hours in the minor clinical practicum hours area. But if you have specific questions when it comes time to fill that out, by all means, you can reach out to me and I can help you with that.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Sandra. We have another question for Colleen pertaining to liability insurance. There's somebody who is asking whether being a newcomer to Canada will have any impact on their ability to obtain liability insurance, if you know.
I haven't heard that has influenced somebody's ability to get liability insurance. However, if you are someone who is applying for membership with the professional association, I know that SAC has a reciprocal agreement with other professional associations. So if that's part of your background, SAC has liability insurance that's available for their members. So that could be an avenue for obtaining liability insurance for you. But it's not the only avenue, and definitely there are a lot of resources out there to get professional liability insurance.
Amazing, thanks so much. We have one question for Cassandra pertaining to mentorship. So I think this is actually a frequently asked question. It reads, I've not worked as many hours as I expected and will not have 500 hours by the end of my 6-month period. Will I be able to get an extension?
So there is a formal process for requesting an extension to mentorship. There's a form that is found in the mentorship self-assessment tool under the mentees resources section. You'd have to fill in the information into that document and submit it to the college for review. I wouldn't say that it's going to be something that is a long process. The reality is once it's submitted, it's reviewed relatively quickly. And if that is the only issue and the amount of hours that you will be working should allow for an appropriate amount of hours to be obtained in the period that you request, it will be approved.
Awesome, thanks so much, Cassandra. Colleen, how much time do we have left? How many more questions can we take, do you think?
We have 5 more minutes.
Okay, wonderful. So I guess I'll just try to get through as many of them as possible. There's somebody asking about CETP examination. They ask, when can someone who is not going into mentorship apply or enroll for CETP exams, considering the different openings available in the year? Sandra, if you want to take this one, maybe.
Someone who is not going into. Okay, so that would mean that you are pursuing a general certificate of registration. And that means that once you are informed that you are eligible to write the CETP exam, so you're eligible for a general certificate of registration and you're eligible to write the CETP exam, then you would then be able to apply in the next enrollment period to write the exam, and then you would write the exam after that. I hope that answers the question.
Okay, amazing. Yes, and if that's still unclear, feel free to let us know using the questions tab. For Cassandra, since we have a couple more minutes, I'll ask you one relating to mentorship that asks, can I change mentors in the middle of my mentorship? For example, if there is a change in my employment or if the mentor goes on leave, etc.
Yes, the college recognizes that there may be circumstances where you need to change your mentor or you need to change your employment option. If that is the case, then certainly you need to notify the college within 30 days by providing an updated mentorship contract. There are certain challenges that may present themselves based on when in the mentorship period you are looking to change jobs or change mentors that may complicate things and require an extension to the mentorship period as a whole.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Cassandra. I know we have about 2 minutes to close off, so I'm happy to hand it back to the presenters. That was all the questions that we had.
Oh, great. I guess we'd like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar, and to say that we are available for additional questions. You can reach us at the email addresses that we provided throughout the presentation, or at the general CASLPO@caslpo.com email address. And we do have a Facebook page and a YouTube channel, so we encourage you to follow us. And thank you again for participating.